Scruffy Audio Network.
Are you ready to do this?
Oh, yeah, this is going to be epic.
I am so excited about this thing.
Yes.
Okay, you want to introduce us?
All right, yeah, let's do it. Welcome to Why Would You Go There? Podcast about travel. I'm Lee, along with my buddy, co-host.
Don't say co-host. I'm actually the host.
Okay.
You're just the extra. Yeah, I'm Troy. I'm the host. And you're the co-host slash extra.
Well,
okay.
You made it about 10 seconds before
I
you totally
insulted
botched
you?
this.
Yeah, okay. Hey, we are so excited today.
We really are.
Because we have some folks joining us from all the way around the world.
Yes.
Not all the way around the world, because that would be just in West Knoxville, but halfway around the world.
Yes.
So
a long way away.
We have Craig and Linda from Indie Travel Podcast, which I've listened to tons of their podcast. And Craig, Linda, you want to say hello?
Hey, hi.
G'day, you all right? Hello.
Listen to that. They said good day. We don't say that here. So that is pretty exciting. By here, I mean, surely we're world famous at this point, but we're world famous, but I'm talking about people in Tennessee don't say that. Yeah. So we're going to do things a little different this time. It's not going to be
from New Zealand, right?
From
you
New
didn't
Zealand.
Even say that.
Did I say? Oh, I didn't.
No.
I didn't.
Way to introduce them.
Oh, sorry. I botched that, didn't I?
You did.
It happens every podcast.
It's all right. We're from New Zealand, but we're in Australia, so, it doesn't matter.
Oh, yes.
So why don't you tell folks...
Is that like a 2-for-1, or is that...
Yeah, that is awesome.
I don't know.
It is.
Sure,
That's got to be like two of the places that people from our area, from the U.S., want to go the most, because it's generally the toughest to get to, the longest to get to,
and the most expensive to get to.
Well, that's true.
Those are the things that are keeping me from going. That's the thing. It's so expensive. So the name of the podcast is Indie Travel Podcast. Why don't you just, by way of introduction, tell folks how long you've been podcasting? I've got a ton of questions for you, because I know you've been traveling forever, and exactly what this lifestyle is.
Yeah, I if I find out exactly what it is, I'll let you guys know as soon as possible. But in the interim, we started podcasting in 2006.
Did they have podcasts in 2006? That's
so
crazy.
True.
Yeah, it was. I tell you, we had been traveling for about 9 months, and we were
they
sitting
invented
with a
the
friend
podcast.
going, we have stuffed up so much. We have made so many dumb mistakes. We should be able to share this with people. And we said, we're thinking about doing a website or a blog. It's like, don't do a blog. There's like 100 travel blogs. The whole thing is just exploded and saturated. There's just too many. You want to do a podcast? There's only like 2 travel podcasts. And we were like, yeah, we'll do a podcast. That's a great idea. Thanks, Foreman. High five. Have another drink. What's a podcast?
We had no idea.
We had no idea.
Podcast?
So we agreed that was going to be our format before we even knew what it was.
He's a trustworthy guy. He knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. He's on the cutting edge of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up doing a podcast. That was in 2006.
So,
we're literally like 2 other travel podcasts. That's all there was.
And so you've been doing podcasts since 2006, and you have, 400. How many podcasts do you have?
I think it's 360 something.
360 podcasts.
Yeah, we started out doing it once a week, and then that was too often. So we went down to once every 2 weeks, and recently we've been a bit slack. So we're about once a month, but we're going to get back into it.
Yeah, definitely.
I just got done listening to your last podcast, and you were in Auckland at the time, and during the podcast, you said something about being in Australia in 3 weeks, and I paused the podcast, and I was driving somewhere, woke my wife up, who was in the passenger seat, said, they're going to be on our podcast in 3 weeks when they're in Australia. So I was pretty excited about it.
Way to tell them that your wife was asleep during their podcast. Good job. Nice. Sorry.
Actually, a lot of people have told us
I wasn't
they listen to
asleep.
our podcast as they fall asleep. They get into bed, they put on their headphones, and they fall asleep to us, our dulcet tones.
That's a compliment.
That's awesome. Yeah.
That's a compliment,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
I was wondering if there was
soothing
a
voice.
marketing angle, the travel podcast that puts you to sleep. But I thought, no, let's not go there.
There are tons of travel podcasts that will put you to sleep for sure. One of the reasons we reach out to you guys is because you were maybe the only travel podcast that I found that I was like, okay, these guys seem to have a sense of humor. We kind of act like idiots most of the time when we're podcasting. Yeah, we definitely act like idiots most of the time because we travel for us.
And we definitely know it's an act. Yeah,
it is an act.
Thank you. Gosh, way to play along, Craig. Yes.
Traveling is just so fun for us. We feel like you should be able to just have a great time with it. We're trying to give a little bit of information, but we're trying to have a good time just like we have a good time traveling. And most travel podcasts are very serious about this travel. And you guys are serious but playful too. So I like that. So
that's nice. Thank you.
Sure. So you guys have been podcasting and traveling. So you must have been traveling for a while before you started podcasting. You said like 9 months or so. Did I miss that? Did I get that wrong?
Yeah. Well, we both come from traveling families. We both traveled when we were kids. And then in New Zealand, it's pretty normal to go on an OE, which is an overseas experience. You pack up, you finish high school, university, whatever, and you go away for anything between kind of 6 months to 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And we decided it's pretty good. So we decided we'd go for a bit longer, but we wanted to pay off our student loans first. So we worked really hard and saved up, and then left when we were a bit older. We were about 23, 24.
Yeah, I have to say student loans in New Zealand are probably about 0 to 3% of what they are in the States. So it's not like we came out and got like 7-figure jobs straight out of uni.
Yeah, and I say our student loans, but I didn't have one. Craig had one. So.
Yeah. No, they're really heavily subsidized here. So it's maybe about, for like New Zealanders going to a New Zealand university, it's about 8 to 10 grand a year in tuition fees. So it's significantly less than in the States. So we were able to do that.
Yeah, it's possible to save up. I mean, I worked a certain job. I got a partial scholarship, and I ended without any debt. And Craig, I think you just got a scholarship last year?
Yeah, I had a couple of years worth of savings and worked a couple of jobs right through university and managed to scrape by.
But anyway, we're talking about traveling. So we paid those off, and then we started traveling when we were 23, 24. And so we're a little bit older, and we kind of knew what we wanted to do. We wanted to live somewhere. We wanted to get a job somewhere. So we trained to be English teachers. And before we left New Zealand, we did an epic kind of 6-week road trip around New Zealand with our friend.
Right.
And then we went to Malta, and we got jobs teaching English. I was working in a hotel. And yeah, from there we just started traveling. So I think we started the podcast after we'd had 6 months in Malta and then about 3 months traveling through Europe. Then we went to Perth for 6 months in Australia, and we're like coming home after 2.5 years or so.
It's about 3 years, I think, yeah.
And we were saying, okay, this is what we were planning to do. We're coming home.
Yeah, going to be adults.
We're going to be adults.
It's going to work.
And we got home and we just said, yeah, nah. So we bought tickets out again.
Yeah, within a week of landing, we had bought tickets to South America.
Oh, wow.
we were gone again. And, we tried again this year. We said, hey, it's 2019. It's time to grow up. And so we came back to Auckland in December of last year. And we said, right, we're going to be in Auckland for like 2 to 3 years. We're going to settle down. Linda wanted to go back into teaching, so she's like, right, I'm going to go and get a real contract at a real school and do this thing.
Yeah.
And the school went, if you get this qualification, then that would be better for all involved. And Linda's like, right, so I can do the qualification part-time over 2 years by distance, or we can go to Tbilisi for 2 months during the New Zealand winter. And we went, being an adult isn't all it cracked up to be. Let's go skip the country again. So Linda, that course got shifted. So in the end, we're going to go to Prague for a couple of months. It's going to be tragic. So yeah.
My experience is so unimpressive. You said you were coming back. You said you were going to get a house.
They're like, yeah, good idea and all that. But, it's...
So how many countries?
It is only for 10 weeks. Well, it's an 8-week course, and then we've got 2 weeks of holidays.
Yeah, so we still haven't figured out how to stop. We've been trying, off and on for the last 10 years, but still failing.
Sounds like you're succeeding to me.
Yeah.
So how many countries have you all been to?
This is a question of contention. So Linda's brother is both competitive and an accountant. So he has tabulated a spreadsheet for the family to compete on.
Yeah.
And with, because you can break down countries in different ways. Do we
True.
say like the US is one place, or do we break it down by state? And it's the
What do we
same.
say is the main part, and then you've got Alaska and Hawaii as different parts.
Yeah. So
Yes.
like a lot of countries have these different ways to break them up, which isn't just the UN geopolitical list. And so he's come up with this big spreadsheet that we tabulate on.
We're winning.
So we're winning, which
But he
is
was
good.
Of course
catching
you
up.
are. Of course.
Yeah. Well, you say that, but he was catching up because he's moved to London with his
Oh.
wife, and they were going on epic trips every weekend. And because he works for British Airways, he gets discounted trips.
Oh, wow.
But they're pregnant, so that's going to stop for a while.
Yeah. So we've got a chance to get our nose back in front again. But I think we're somewhere in the mid-70s.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
70s. That
Yeah.
is great.
65.
That is great. So 75-ish countries. And you're counting the United States as one country, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The
So
United
the
States
list that we
is
use
one
with my
country.
brother is a different list. It counts like Hong Kong and Macau as separate countries, and I think England and Scotland are different countries. So I think that list has about 400 places on it, whereas the one we go by generally is the UN list, which has 193.
Okay.
193.
So about a third of the way there.
Yeah, wow. That is great. I thought between Lee and I started a TripAdvisor page here recently for Why Would You Go There? And I said, oh man, we've been like 80 or 90% of the world, and it was like 19%
And Lee
of the
said,
world.
you've lost your mind.
Lee's been to a lot. He's been to a lot of countries, but not if it's 193. I guess we're probably together a quarter of the way through that, right? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty good. He's 2/3 of our quarter. He's twice as much as I am, but I didn't start traveling a lot until the last probably 10 years, and he still travels probably 3 times as much as I do, maybe 4 times as much.
Speaking of, I'm coming to Australia. I'm coming out that way in a few months, so I'm going to be looking for some
awesome.
advice
Where are you
on
gonna go?
on some
Right.
things. So, yeah.
Yeah, before we get into, so let's get into that. But before we do, I want you to tell folks how they can find you, because you're so charismatic. All of our fans are going to want to start listening to your podcast. And I know it's Indie Travel Podcast because I listen to it. But why don't you tell folks otherwise? I think you do a blog, and then also I want to know how you do all this travel, because you're kind of location independent. So something's going on with work, because you none of you are royalty. You weren't just born into a lot of money. So you've got to be doing something to earn a living, right?
And that would be awesome. Yeah. So we're working hard. You can find us at indietravelpodcast.com is the website, and there's 10 plus years of us blathering on about things. You can also find us wherever you're listening to podcasts. And it's indie travel, like indie rock, not like Indie 500. So with
Right.
an IE on the end. And you'll find us wherever good content is published. So that's been fun. And then I guess to answer that money question, we started off with English teaching, and we did that, and we're getting short-term contracts for a couple of months here and a couple of months there and a summer camp here. And so we're teaching English to speakers of other languages. And that's what we did in Perth as well, because Australia. No.
Pretty nice.
So people come and travel to Australia and New Zealand to learn English and have a great time. And so we were working in private language schools doing that. And then around 2008, we won Lonely Planet's Best Podcast Award.
Yeah,
And
you
they only
did.
ran
Wow,
they only ran that competition once. So we are still Lonely Planet's
Wow,
Best
man.
Podcast.
You guys,
which is
you need to
fantastic.
lead with
So
that
we're-
in
we're
every
focusing on that.
conversation. You have to lead with that. Listen, if we had won anything, we would be leading with it every single podcast.
That is so true. So
I don't
true.
think you've so humble. I don't think you've ever said anything. People tell me I'm very humble also.
they do
but
not.
I would be saying that. I'm afraid I'd have to. So that's very cool. It's very cool.
So that kind of validated. Parents were like, "Oh, they're doing something worthwhile."
Still waiting for my
So
parents to say that.
yeah. Yeah, they gave up again the next year, but
Maybe about 6 months of
still not a lawyer or a doctor, so it's terrible. But yeah, so at that point, I started working on the podcast, on travel blogging, on publishing ebooks, on all this kind of stuff around online travel publishing, and so that was most of 5 to 10 years ago. Was me doing that, and Linda was still teaching part-time with short-term contracts, and we were both working on the podcast. She's got a much better editorial voice than me, and I was scrabbling to try and make it work as a business. And then about 5 years ago, Linda decided she wanted to go and do her master's, and so that was great, but we couldn't make the travel business work because we weren't traveling, so we weren't generating content, so we weren't getting paid for that content. We're going to be in one place for a year.
We could have made it work. We could have talked a lot because we're going to be in Spain, which is pretty awesome. But it just didn't seem like the best choice.
Yeah, well, we needed 2 people working on it to extract one person's income.
Yes.
So with one person working on it to try and keep on traveling and keep our heads above water, that was going to be tricky. And so at that point, I was actually already getting more emails about web development and around the business of online publishing than I was around travel. And so I went, there's something going on here. So I started doing some consulting around WordPress, which is one of the world's biggest content management systems that businesses use to build websites. And so I started doing some consulting, and then I went, most of people's problem is with their hosting. So I started a hosting product, and then went consulting, hosting, web development, and now it's kind of going a bit full circle again. And we're doing more consulting around marketing and sales online, as well as all of the technical stuff that we do. So that's been the last 5 years, building a company called Performance Foundry. Which if anyone's trying to do stuff online, you can find it at performancefoundry.com. And so, that's what's kept us on the road. And, we've got almost 15 people working with us at Performance Foundry.
Almost 15. Is it like 14 and a half?
Yeah, it is.
We have one dwarf.
I guess it's 15.
Is it a Hobbit from New Zealand?
But we're on 5 continents, so it's fully remote, fully distributed, and serving customers worldwide with staff worldwide. And so we just have
to travel and meet them all.
Yeah, that's right. It gives us a really nice excuse for heading over places. It's, I really need to meet that person who's been working with me for 2 years. Let's go and see them.
Very interesting.
So that's how money works, and that's how we've managed to stay nomadic. Lots of scrambling and some good times and some hard times, just making our own way.
It's pretty cool because even though I'm teaching, I'm going back to do this course in Prague next month actually, and Craig can come with me. I was talking to someone. I said, I'm looking for a place to stay, and I said that the school only provides single rooms. And I said, what's the problem with that? I said, I'm married.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, is your husband going too? And I just thought, of course Craig's coming too. But I realized that a lot of people don't have that,
sure.
That the husband would have to stay at home and keep working. But in this case, Craig's like, woohoo, somewhere in Europe.
Like sunshine in Prague, and cheap beer and good food, and fantastic place to be.
It's really funny because I was hoping to have a year in New Zealand and maybe do this course next year, but the way things have worked out, I'm doing it this year, and I'm like, got to travel. And then I catch myself being a bit negative about it, and I'm like, hang on, wait, shut up. Because everyone's just looking at me, just glaring at me going, you are skipping the New Zealand winter to spend a European summer in one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I'm like, yeah, that's right.
Speaking of New Zealand winter, so that's winter's just starting there now, right?
Yes, it is.
And so what are the temperatures like? I know I'm kind of jumping subjects, but we like to do that a lot. So what's the temperature like right now?
Well, right now we're in Australia and it's freezing. It's actually colder here than it is in our city. So New Zealand is long and skinny. It's got like 2 main islands,
right?
The North Island and the South Island. And we live.
And do you call those the North Island and the South Island?
Yeah, we're really inventive. So we thought we'd give like really creative names to our islands. So they're called the North Island and the South Island. They also have Maori names as well.
They sound so much better in Maori.
Yeah.
So
They do
Te Eka Maui and Te Waipunamu.
Yeah.
That's what they call the Maori.
what?
But we
I'm not sure what language you were just speaking.
That's Te Reo, or Maori, which is the language of the native people of New Zealand. So New Zealand, what about 1,000 years ago? There were no people there. It was just birds. We didn't even have any mammals. So literally just birds, lots of flightless birds. And then about 950 years ago, the Maori people arrived on these big, long waka, which are like long canoes.
Yeah.
They came from the Pacific Islands.
Okay.
And there were a bunch of different tribes, and they populated New Zealand. And then the Europeans arrived in about 1790-ish, and they started coming in, and in typical colonial fashion, they imposed colonial rules and encouraged people to speak English, and so the Maori language was less used. But now there's a renaissance, and people are starting to speak it more. And, you hear people on the radio saying morena, which means good morning, and, just like a few words in the language. But also a lot of people are learning Te Reo, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's coming back. And but anyway, that whole thing doesn't help answer the question about the weather, Linda.
Oh, the weather, that's right. So
That's how
You
we
had
run
a
our
point.
podcast. It doesn't matter. We're just moving on. But yeah, that's fine.
okay, there was a point to talking about the geography, because New Zealand is long and skinny, which means that down
And
the
you have,
bottom.
now I
which is
understand you have
close to
two
the Antarctic-
islands, right?
Okay,
You have two islands?
two islands, yeah. Well,
Is
two
it
main islands.
A North
There's lots of
Island
other
and a
ones.
South Island?
Yep. You're never going to forget. So down the bottom of the South Island, it's close to Antarctica. They get a lot of southerly winds, and it gets really cold. It snows. It's freezing. But we live up towards the north of the North Island.
You guys live in
And
Auckland, is that right?
Auckland, yeah. So
Yeah.
Auckland's the biggest city.
Yep.
The capital is Wellington, which is at the bottom of the North Island.
Oh,
And
yeah.
in our city,
It's at the
winds
south
are
of the
quite
North
mild.
Island.
South
Yeah.
Yeah. But so the winters are quite mild at the moment. It's like highs of 17 degrees Celsius, something like that, lows of about 10, which is totally fine.
So 10's like 50 degrees
Yeah.
Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
us,
and
that
in the
don't use the
north is-
Celsius.
Yeah.
We don't know how to translate into Fahrenheit, unfortunately.
No, there's
we're
only
like-
That's okay.
two countries in the world that use it. So
I was
it's
getting
Yeah.
ready to say, yeah.
So let me ask you this. I kind of do want to talk to you. I think Lee wants to talk a little bit about Australia, but I definitely want to talk about New Zealand, because I think I told you, Linda, in the email that is my wife's dream place, and the only thing that has kept us from going there is the fact that plane tickets are outrageous to get to either Australia or New Zealand. I really don't know
it's a bit pricey.
why you can fly to China a lot cheaper than you can fly to New Zealand. But one of the things we like to talk about is for folks that are going to go, and that's not just my wife's dream place. It's a lot of people's dream place here in the United States. What if we get to Auckland? What are a couple of things or anywhere on the two islands? What are a couple of things that you just have to do? If you're telling somebody coming from the United States, we're going to travel all these hours to get there, this is the one thing or the two things that you have to see in New Zealand.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because you're jumping on a plane.
Well, I
for
know
at
it's a great
least
question, Craig.
12
'cause I'm not sure of
That's
that.
right. You're going out of LA to Auckland. I think it's about it's about 12 hours. So you're getting off, and you don't want to be there for just a weekend, because most of your time will be spent on the plane.
Sure.
So I think that's thing number one, is go for it minimum a week, but preferably try make
As long as you
make
can.
this your long holiday. And I think the visa-free thing works for up to 3 months for American citizens. So you can jump off and go and enjoy yourself for as long as you can. So I think that would be tip number one, is give yourself some time, because Auckland is a great small city, and it's metropolitan, and it's a Pacific hub, and it's an Asian hub, and it's colonial, so it's a European hub as well. So all of these great influences are there, and it's a fantastic city. But most people don't go to New Zealand to visit a city.
Sure.
They
True.
go and see the wildlife and the amazing beaches, dive locations, and a lot of people want to go and see the stuff they've seen in Flight of the Conchords. I mean, in Lord of the Rings.
That's on my list to ask you about. That is on my list to ask you about, because everybody in the United States knows New Zealand by Flight of the Conchords and The Hobbit. Those are the only two things. And first of all, I wanted to know. I want to talk about Flight of the Conchords, and then I also want to talk about Frodo and Gandalf and when you met them.
I think that brings up an important safety message, because those hobbits are real buggers for stealing your washing off of the line, and you have to be careful. If you're leaving stuff outside, those hobbits will come and just take it away. Yeah. So you have to be careful with that.
It's great. I'm so glad you were able to work that in. So if we're coming over there, we're going to try and spend some time. Go ahead.
If you want to go and see that Lord of the Ringsy stuff, what you want to be doing is heading south out of Auckland, and there's a great guidebook you can get that's got all of the locations on it. So some of them are just a couple of hours coach trip or hire car south of Auckland, and you can go to Hobbiton, and they've actually kept the whole location set up with all of the Hobbit homes and with the pub. So you can go and have a beer in, I think it's the Green Dragon pub in Hobbiton, and you can go there and do a tour around the place.
Have you guys done that, or is that too touristy for you?
We haven't done it because we don't often get to that part of the country. I actually flew over Hobbiton maybe like 10 years ago. My sister's a pilot, and she was at some sort of flying conference. She got one of her friends to take me for a trip. But it was actually between the making of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and they'd demolished it all. So they still had the Hobbit holes, but they'd taken away all of the accoutrement. Mm-hmm. And so that meant that it was actually kind of boring. But now because they reconstructed it for The Hobbit, it sounds a lot more interesting. We really should go.
We should. We all do. We must. We will.
Yeah.
Well, when you go,
I would say,
email me after you go and tell me how great it is or how terrible it is, because it's going to be on the list of things that we have to do. Maybe you should do a podcast on it yourselves, and then I'll just listen.
Yeah, we really should. But I would say one thing to do is hire a car, because New Zealand is bigger than you might think. Like, it's small. It's a small country. But the population density is kind of low, which means that public transport, and especially intercity transport, can be a little bit rough. And the beautiful thing about New Zealand is that there's so much awesome nature, and you'll want to take little detours. So I'd recommend hiring a car. One of my favorite things is to go, rather than going south out of Auckland, is to go north out of Auckland, and you get to the Bay of Islands, which is a beautiful area. It's actually where the original capital of New Zealand was.
Now,
and they've got
what is it called again?
dolphin
I'm sorry.
Tours. The Bay of Islands.
Bay of Islands, okay.
Once again, really original naming.
The you know what's in the bay? There's islands. You're surprised, right? So
that is what it says on the tin.
Yeah. But there are actually town names like Paihia, Kerikeri, Russell. I think they're proper names. Yeah. And there's a glowworm cave up there that's run by a Maori family, which I think is really cool.
That's actually number 2 on TripAdvisor, and I'm man, you're hitting all the things that TripAdvisor says to hit too. So, glowworm caves.
Because TripAdvisor probably recommends the Waitomo Caves, which is south of Auckland, and they are really touristy. I mean, they're fine, but they're quite expensive. So I'm recommending an alternative one, which is in the Bay of Islands. It's quite nearby here. It's cheaper. It's about $20 instead of $80 or $100.
Yeah, it's kind of a half-hour experience instead of a 2 to 3 hour experience.
Okay,
it depends on what you want.
But you get the
So exactly what is the glowworm cave?
So a glowworm is a type of insect that emits a light from its butt.
Okay.
I believe it's its poo.
Yeah, that's kind of like a firefly. Do you guys have fireflies? We have fireflies here, which are flies.
Yeah. So it's kind of like a firefly, but it doesn't fly.
Sure, it's a worm. So it crawls, right?
It's in caves. And but you can go into these big caves, and with the lights off, it looks like you're looking at the Milky Way. You know, there's just hundreds of thousands of these lights really cool. of various, various strengths all around the place. And so you're in these beautiful caverns to start with, and, amazing places to be under the ground. And then, you have this kind of night sky effect with bugs.
Yeah, wow. Very cool.
So let me ask you, how long would it take to go from, kind of a northern part of the island to the southern part of the island, if you were to drive a car?
About 2 months, I reckon, if you do it right.
It's bigger than I thought.
There's just so many places to go, but the distances aren't that huge. But if you're used to jumping on a freeway in the States and, driving, of course, at the speed limit all of the way across on these lovely straight bits of freeway, you're going to be surprised when you hit the main road in New Zealand and you start heading south, and it starts off pretty good. It's kind of 6 to 8 lanes, and that's all good. And then a couple of hours further down, you're down to 2 lanes, one each way, with no barrier in between it, no lights on the side of the road. And then a couple of hours further south, you might end up with some sheep crossing in front of you or something like that. So that you can't just look at the map and go, oh, yeah, it's cool. It's a couple of 100 Ks. That'll take us 2 hours. No.
Especially in the south. A lot of people fly into Queenstown, which is one of the most, it's probably the adventure capital of New Zealand, I think they call it. There's bungee jumping and skydiving and all sorts of things. But it's quite near Milford Sound, which is another major tourist destination. It's a beautiful area where you can go boating, and there's a wonderful hike.
Great hiking, yeah.
But people look at the map and they think, okay, I can get there in an hour. And no, it's kind of a 3-4 hour trip because it's all windy roads and there are lots of people on the road and lots of buses because everyone's going there. So, yeah, some people try to do it in a morning. It's just impossible.
Yeah. I guess that's an important safety reminder, because if you haven't ever sat on a plane for 12 hours before and ended up on the wrong side of the world with all the time zones changed, you don't want to be jumping in a car as soon as you've done that and driving for half a day.
Sure.
Also on the wrong side of the road.
On the wrong side of the road, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, Lee, you got some... Was there something else you want to talk about New Zealand, or did you have some Australia questions since they're now in Australia? And, I do have a question because I always like to dominate the conversation.
Yeah, you do.
So if we fly that far, we are probably thinking of doing Australia, maybe Eastern Australia for a while, and then New Zealand. And I know there's a lot of cruises that you can get that will do New Zealand and then go back. I think they're out of Sydney, maybe Sydney. So can you do, realistically, in a 2-week period, can you do both?
If you like spending a lot of time on a boat.
Well, I didn't necessarily mean on a cruise, but I mean if you wanted to fly into Sydney and do Sydney for a week, or is it possible?
I wouldn't do it on a cruise personally, because I think you spend 2 days just crossing the Tasman. And so I'd fly into Sydney, maybe go down to Melbourne. So I have like 2 or 3 days in Sydney, 2 or 3 days in Melbourne. They're the top cities on the East Coast. And then fly across to New Zealand and have more time in New Zealand, because in Australia you probably don't want to be driving between cities because the distances are really long. One time I was in Sydney and I needed to get to Melbourne. I thought, I could fly or I could go by train. And I looked into the prices. They were the same as $100. And I looked into the times, and the flight was going to be an hour and a half. Totally reasonable. The train was going to be 13 hours. So I went by plane.
Sure.
So, but in New Zealand, part of the attraction is the drive. So you fly into New Zealand, you hire a car, and you just go for a drive. If you are going to be only having 2 weeks in Australia and New Zealand, I'd probably choose one island. So choose either the North Island or the South Island. Or maybe do a road trip around the North Island and then fly down to Queenstown and have a couple of days there, something like that. So don't try to do everything in that amount of time.
Yep, sure.
So I think I'd like to do like a New Zealand, like a Fiji in with that too, or somewhere like that.
Oh, yeah.
One of those places that are, I'm sure they're still not super close, but they're about as close as I want to be if I'm ever in New Zealand. That's about the closest place I'll get. So is that feasible? How far is that? Any idea?
Yeah, definitely.
4 hours from Auckland to Fiji, so that's fine. And you can I know that there are flights. I think Air Fiji flies from Auckland to Fiji to LA, maybe. I'm not sure. But I think there is a flight that you can do. So maybe on your way home or on your way there, you could get that flight and make it work instead of having to go to Fiji and then come back to Auckland and then go back to the States.
Okay. So cool. So one thing I wanted to talk about is for New Zealand, I think of just all, kind of like Troy mentioned, the Hobbit stuff, but yeah, all the landscape. So it sounds like, as you were talking, that you start off on this 6-lane highway, and then you get down to 2 lanes, and then you get some sheep crossing in front of you. So I think that's more of what I would really be interested in, is just seeing the different landscapes. So I assume that's going to be several hours outside of any city area.
Not at all. Yeah. You're going to find that really quickly.
Oh, cool.
Even in Auckland, I mean, we've got areas in our city, the biggest city in Auckland, quite near where Craig's parents live. There's just some fields and there's sheep in them. And on my way to work, we live in the south of Auckland, and I go into the city centre, and there are horses and fields, and it's very green everywhere. Even the cities are very green.
Yeah,
and drive for 20 minutes outside of any city, and you'll be in a rural area.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's a movie that a lot of people may not have seen called The Piano by Jane Campion, and this was a really big movie in the 90s. And it's
I'm aging myself. I've seen it.
Yeah, and so that it's these stunning black sand beaches with towering cliffs and dramatic waves, and that's about 25 minutes away from Auckland's central business district.
Yeah.
Oh wow. So it's there. It's not like
that's where we go hiking. Well, we do go hiking, but at the moment it's closed because of that.
The hills around it are closed. They're trying to stop a tree disease. That's what we do in New Zealand. That's like top headline news. Is
wash your shoes.
Wash your shoes, because we don't want this disease spreading to the other trees. And
are you walking on the trees?
That's what I love.
No, the disease spreads through the roots.
Sure. Wow.
Through the soil.
Wow.
Yeah.
If you get soil on your shoes, and then you walk in another area where it doesn't have the disease, you'll spread it.
Yeah. So I love coming back from overseas and just coming back to New Zealand news. It's just fantastic. And yeah, it's amazing. And so but there are these amazing natural experiences to be had just there. And so it's great. But I think if you really want to see those landscapes of Lord of the Rings, then some of them are out of the way, but I just go and spend a couple of bucks and get that location guidebook that they published. And then you'll be able to plot out, which ones are accessible to the other places that you want to go.
Right. And then just rent a car and take off.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And some of the places, like if you're really into it, you can do like helicopter tours and go, and do flyovers of some of the places. But a lot of them are accessible.
Okay, good deal. So that gives me some good info about New Zealand.
Yeah,
I guess
too.
I'll ask you briefly about Australia, just because it's so big and there's so much to talk about. Do you have specific cities or areas that you prefer, that you like in Australia? I know you mentioned you lived in Perth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Perth is on the west coast, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and it's
cool. I really liked it.
It's fantastic.
There's like this island just off the coast, and you can go by ferry, called Rottnest Island, and they have an animal called a quokka, which sounds like it's made up, but it isn't. And it's just this marsupial that lives there, and when the people arrived, they thought it was big rats, so that's why they called it Rottnest, the rat nest island. And they'll just come up and like chat to you and eat your food.
Oh wow!
So that was quite cool. Yeah.
That's what they do. But it's completely unique, and that's one of the cool things about Australia. If you look at a map, you're kind of like, there's all these cities down the east coast, and that's where the Great Barrier Reef is, and that's where most of the names of places you've heard go down the east coast, and it kind of curves along the south a little bit
until you get to Adelaide.
Until you get about a third of the way along. And if you're looking at Australia at night, you just see nothing for most of the rest of the continent until you get these lights around Perth on the west coast. So it's kind of like going, well, hey, you leave New York and there's some other cities around there, but between, a couple of hours out of New York, then there's nothing until you hit LA on the other side. There's just this emptiness in the middle. And people don't understand that you're crossing a whole continent. They go, there's some cities over there and a city there, so I'll just drive that. And like 2 days later, you're still in the car going, oh my God.
Basically, you don't want to plan to drive between cities in Australia. The distances are so long. If you want to spend time in Australia, I'd recommend you choose a couple of cities and explore within the city and outside of the city. Maybe hire a car, like Adelaide is quite good. You can get out of the city, maybe go to Kangaroo Island, which is quite fun. There's kangaroos and lots of other animals.
Yeah, lots of adventure sports there.
Yeah.
And cool stuff.
And from Melbourne, you can do a day trip out to, what's it called?
Port Phillip and the Penguin Colony, you thinking?
I was thinking about the Great Ocean Road.
Great Ocean Road, yeah, fantastic out there. Lots of good wineries around the place as well.
And from Sydney, you can go to the Blue Mountains. So there's lots of like day trips that you can do, but that's what I'd recommend you do. Choose 2 or 3 cities and plan a day trip out of each one so that you get to see the city and you get to see something outside of the city. But don't plan to travel between the cities by land.
There's one exception to that if you're feeling adventurous, which is to go between Adelaide, which is in the south, and Darwin in the north. And you're going through a massive desert. So this is the kind of thing where if you get lost, you don't come back. So there is
like fun.
Troy, you should try it out. You'll love it.
But it's fantastic. But you bring your own water with you. You bring your own camping gear.
We did it on a tour. And it was great. We did it on a bus, and we saw people doing it like that. They'd prepared themselves. They had their fans and things. It just looked like a lot of work. So we went from Adelaide, and it was a 2-day trip up to Alice Springs. We passed through, maybe it was 6 days.
Yeah, it was more than 2 days.
It was a 6-day trip. And we went past Uluru, which is also called Ayers Rock, which was amazing. And but you can also keep going. So that's basically the middle of the country. And if you keep going, you get to Darwin.
Yeah, so you can drive kind of south to north or north to south through this amazing desert. But it's a bit Wild Westy. It's a bit rough. Mm-hmm. So if you want to be...
You get all sorts of little cool towns like Kupapedi, which is an opal mining town. And everyone lives underground. Like they live in caves under the ground. Like they're proper houses. They're dug out of the rock. But it's a lot cooler because during the day it's sweltering. So yeah, and they have a year-round temperature underground of like 25 degrees or something, which is quite nice.
That's good. So I'm going to Australia in a few months, and the Ayers Rock, Alice Springs, those are the areas that I was debating on visiting. So you're kind of making it sound like we definitely need to go there. I think
I'd recommend it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's really unique. Like Sydney and Melbourne are both amazing cities, and they have unique but global cultures. But when you go to a city, you're going to a city. Big cities have more in common with each other than with the rest of the country. And so, if you go to New York and London and Melbourne, there's elements of that which are the same, and there's a lot of similarities between them. But there's nowhere in the world that's quite like Kupapedi or Ayers Rock. These are really unique things. And so I love going into big famous cities, and I love experiencing the uniqueness of them. But for me, I've got to get out of that as well. I've got to go and see the weird stuff that's maybe a bit harder to get to or a bit more travel time. But it's the stuff that's unique, which is most exciting for me.
Yeah, that's true. We were talking the other day about our trip in Cambodia, and everyone goes to Phnom Penh and Siem Reap. But our highlight was this little town called Battambang, which we arrived on a bus, and then we did this tuk-tuk tour, and it was just, people go, how did you find out about this? I don't know how we found out about it. But we stumbled across this tuk-tuk tour, and it was just actually one of the most memorable experiences.
Awesome.
I think we'd prefer to do that again than go back to Phnom Penh. So, it's good.
So that's interesting because I think I'm similar in that regard. I'm not a huge city person. I like cities. I enjoy them, but we're not even planning on going to Sydney or Melbourne. We're talking more about going to Cairns or Cairns. I don't know how you say it, but talking about more going there and kind of doing the drive to Alice Springs and all that stuff. So that's good. That's good news.
I think you really like it.
Well, good. So I did. I don't know if Troy had any other questions, but I did have one other main question that I wanted to ask you guys. Since you've been to so many places, do you have like a top 2 or 3 places that interest you the most or that you'd recommend?
That's a great question. For folks that...
In the whole world.
that haven't traveled.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, the whole world. Anywhere you've been.
Right. For people that haven't
Don't say Auckland.
Before.
You can't say Auckland.
Because this is one of the weird things, right? Because I think that like any drug, travel is... You start getting more extreme the longer that you've been in it, right?
True.
And so good places to go for first-time travelers that aren't really comfortable with the idea of that, or a bit worried about that difference, that cultural difference, I tend to go to the places that you've heard of. Go to somewhere that you know about, that you've heard about, that you've wanted to go all of your life. Go there. That's the best place for you.
Yeah.
And you'll see the sights that you've always wanted to see. You'll eat the food you've always wanted to eat, and you'll get annoyed by how the wait staff treat you. And you'll
Great
be
advice.
like all of that stuff. And you'll at some point you go, oh, this is like being at home, but different, and that's okay.
Sure.
And then from there, you can, you start building that travel muscle. You start building that confidence, because I think everywhere in the world, people probably want the same as you. They want tomorrow to be a little bit better than today. They want their kids to grow up healthy and do well. And that's the same everywhere. So going overseas, it's not like, those ethics or those values suddenly change because you've crossed the border. It's just people approach life a different way. And that's not a bad thing. And it's, it might not quite fit your idea of how the world should work. But hey, it's worked for them for dozens or hundreds of or thousands of years. So, it obviously works somehow.
So you'd say go where you want to go.
Go where you want to go, yeah.
For me, choosing one destination that's our favorite is probably Spain. We spend a lot of time in Spain. And I don't know, every time we go back, we love it. So if you don't have a place that you really want to go to, I think Spain is a good one. Of course, they speak Spanish there, so learning a few words would be helpful. But there's heaps to do. Every part of the country is different, and the food is really good, and people are friendly, and it's just, it's amazing. Like going to Madrid, there's heaps to do there, and you can do day trips as well. We spend a lot of time in the north, and there's heaps of festivals. It's great.
Those smaller cities along the northern coast and the west coast are just fantastic and really undervisited. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people go to Barcelona, Catalonia, maybe Costa Brava, fantastic out there as well. It's on the east coast. Mm-hmm. But yeah, along the border with France, the mountains, and then the northern and northwestern coasts, some of my favorite places.
And also the south, like Granada with the Alhambra.
Yeah, amazing.
Cool things down there. One thing we love to do is there's a network of hiking paths that all go across all of Spain and end up in a city called Santiago de Compostela. And it's a walk called the Camino. And we've never heard about it. Maybe you've heard of the movie. It's called The Way with
it's got Martin Sheen.
I don't know, but I'm going to look it up now.
Yeah. You have to. It's our favorite thing.
It's not a great movie, but it's a great experience.
Way to sell it, Craig.
In the Middle Ages, people would leave their house. It was great. People would leave their house and they'd walk to Santiago. And in the 80s, it kind of developed a renaissance. It kind of died away because people didn't feel the need to do pilgrimages anymore. But in the 80s, it kind of was reborn. And now thousands of people do this walk every year. And the most popular one starts on the border with France, and it goes about 100 kilometers inland, and they walk all the way across from the border with France to Santiago de Compostela. But there are lots of other walks as well. So we did one from Seville, which is in the south of Spain, walked for 1,000 kilometers north to Santiago de Compostela. And we did it for our 10th wedding anniversary. So we arrived on the day of the anniversary. It was very nice.
And there's nothing like walking nonstop for 6 weeks and not getting in a vehicle to
make you appreciate your relationship.
It's solidified your relationship,
you can
right?
Walk for as long as you want.
Yeah.
Sorry, what's that?
Yeah. Well,
you can walk for as long as you want. You can start wherever you want. We've done one that was only 3 days. We've done one that was like 10 days.
Yeah, we've got quite a bit of info on this. If you go to indietravelpodcast.com/Camino, which is like CAMINO. And yeah, we've got a little mini portal there about some of our experiences.
We'll check that out, and I hope our listeners there. Yeah,
it's awesome. I mean, we did it for the first time in 2008, and Craig wanted to do it, and I was like, oh, whatever. And then I did it, and this is how we decided things.
Another crazy idea.
Yeah. You sound exactly like Linda. You sound exactly like our wives, but with an accent.
Well, I'm dragging him to Prague, and he's like, all right. So yeah, one of us will have an idea, and the other one will go, okay, if that's what you really want to do. And then we'll do it, and then we'll both love it. It's pretty much the circle that happens. Yeah. So in this case, we started in Pamplona, which is famous for the running of the bulls.
Right.
And we walked for about 5 weeks. That was about 850 kilometers. And when we finished, when we arrived, we didn't want to stop. It was just so cool. You get into this routine. You wake up in the morning, you pack up your bag, which is quite light because you don't want to carry much on your back. And then you walk. And all you have to think about is, where are we going to stop for lunch? What are we going to have for dinner? And where are we going to sleep?
Yeah.
That's literally it.
I'm looking at going, right, it's thinking kilometers. I'll try and translate into miles. I'm like, okay, it's 2 miles to the first town, and there's a cafe in that town. Perfect. So I'm going to walk for an hour and a half. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to have a tostada with fresh olive oil and tomato on it, and I'm going to have an espresso. And then I'll walk for another 3 miles. Okay, I'll get there for lunchtime, and there's a restaurant there. It's not like you're hiking. It's not like you're on the Appalachian Trail.
No.
You're walking through some farmers' fields for a bit, and and then hitting another village, and then
that sounds cool.
It's really cool.
We're thinking about doing this time last year. I decided I needed a break, so I went and walked for 1 week in the Camino del Norte. So that's the one that goes along the north coast. So I went from San Sebastian to Bilbao, a little bit further. And so after I do this course in Prague, we're going to be in Europe. So I thought, maybe we can just do another week. So we'll probably fly down to Spain and get to the point where I finished. And Craig's thinking about whether he's going to do it with me, or maybe I'll just do it by myself.
Yeah.
But it's great. It's the kind of thing you can do by yourself, because there's accommodation for pilgrims. The only people who stay there are people walking this route. You have to have a little passport. You get a stamp every night, and that's your proof that you're doing it.
Cool.
And
wow.
It's really cheap. It's cheap. Like, the accommodation costs maybe €10 between €6 and €20 anyway. The most I paid last time was €18, and that's fine. And then the food is quite cheap. They often have pilgrim meals, like a 3-course menu for lunch or for dinner at around €15. It's
That's
so
not
good.
expensive
I'd
at
highly
all.
recommend it.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I did it on. Well, the first time we did it, we were almost broke. We did it on €25 for both of us. The last time was last year. I did it, I think, at €25 just for me. But yeah, you can easily do €20 to €30 per person, depending on your budget per day.
Well, that is some great advice. I love it. I think we're getting ready. We've been on this almost an hour. The hour has flown by.
Yeah.
Before we get off of here, though, first of all, I want to say if there's any. I think you've kind of done some parting words with some ideas of what folks can do. Maybe seasoned travelers doing those walks that you talk about in Spain. And we're going to look up Camino on Indie Travel Podcast website. And then I loved Craig's advice for first-time travelers to go someplace that you've thought about and read about and heard about, and then you can see that folks are pretty much the same anywhere. So that is great advice. Before we get off of here, though, Lee, do you have any final thoughts? And I want to let them talk more about or tell more about how folks can reach them, because I know after listening to this, our listeners are going to want to listen to their podcast.
Very true. Yeah. I don't have a whole lot. As you bring up reach them, I just want to point out that I followed them on Twitter like 2 weeks ago and they never followed us back, but whatever.
that was that's the East Tennessee jab, guys.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
But no, really, it was a joy having you guys. You guys have made me jealous. You make me want to travel more. I always enjoy discussing traveling, so you've kind of heightened that even more. So thank you for all your information, all your tips, and that's all I've got.
Hey, do you guys have an Instagram?
We do, but we haven't really been keeping up with it. I mean, we go through phases with social media where we're like, we're so into Twitter. And then Instagram is the best. But yes, Instagram and Twitter, it's both Indie Travel.
Indie Travel Podcast. All right, I'm going to look that up.
Just Indie Travel. No podcast.
No podcast. It's just Indie Travel for Twitter.
Just Indie Travel.
And for Instagram. Mm-hmm. Okay, good. All right, well, I think we're going to get off here. Guys, thanks so much. This was
thanks so much for having us.
Listen, you have a great podcast, and I love the fact that you guys don't mind joking a little bit and on your podcast, and you make it kind of easy to listen to, and there's always a lot of great tips. I listened to the Auckland episode recently, like 10 very inexpensive things to do in Auckland, and then I also listened to a London podcast from a while back where I think you did 5 your 5 favorite things or 5 inexpensive things to do in London. And I love the story about the squirrels. So people need to go and look that podcast up and listen to the story about the squirrels and your fascination with squirrels that you had never seen.
They're cool.
Yeah, they're everywhere here. People can't keep them out of their bird feeders. They're nice. So, anyway, thanks so much for being on the podcast, and I think we're about ready to wrap this thing up.
Yeah. So,
sure, Troy, Lee, thanks so much. It's been a blast.
Well, good deal.
Well, Lee, why don't you end with our motto, and we'll cut it.
So our motto is: it's better to go someplace that you hate than to not go anywhere at all. So go do some traveling.
Go do something. You are not going to hate Auckland, though. It doesn't sound.
Find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Why would you go there? Look up Linda and Craig as well. Indie Travel Podcast or Indie Travel. Sorry.
Indie Travel on Twitter. Indie Travel Podcast is the podcast.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. Well, we're out of here. Thank you guys. Thank you very much. Ben, cue the music. Okay, you guys can't hear the music. But there's going to be music here. So
we can't hear it either, can we?
Well, I can. I don't know what's wrong with you. I can hear it.
Seriously?
Anyway, yeah. Oh, yeah, I can hear it loud and clear. It's just fine. There's something wrong with your ears. Craig, Linda.
Something wrong with your face.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you guys doing this. You're our first guest, I guess, from another podcast. First podcast guest. And I don't know that we're probably going to have any. Well, I say that our wives were on our show. They used to run a podcast.
We can claim best guests then too.
Yeah, best guests.
That's awesome.
Also worst guests.
Wow. Yeah, you're best. You're the best guest. Best guest we've ever had. No. Anyway, thanks so much. And I know it's, what is it, like 9, 10 o'clock there?
Yeah, 10:15.
10:15, and you guys are. Now, did we wake you up? Because I know from podcasts in the past that I think Craig likes to sleep, doesn't he?
What happened was we're looking after my nephews at the moment, and I had to take them to school. So I've been getting up early. But the reason we were late was because I managed to get lost on the way to the school.
Did you?
I've done it so many times, but I took the wrong turning, and I'm like, I seem to be in the wrong place entirely. So yeah, it took a little bit longer. And of course, I was trying to be a bit faster because I want to come back in time for this. And shame.
That's
Guys,
hilarious. I'm glad you saved that for the end, so it wasn't like long-term travelers, Craig and Linda can't find their way around.
Ben, I hope you're still rolling.